to the British Shakespeare Association's Honorary Fellowship Awards ceremony. My name's Professor Alison Finley, and I've been serving as chair of the committee, the Fellowships Committee on the Board of Trustees. And in this role, I am very pleased to be honouring two outstanding people, Christopher Grace, MBE, and Dame Janet Suzman, who have made and are continuing to make major contributions to the understanding and enjoyment of Shakespeare's work through the fields of education, broadcasting, directing and performance. So I'm going to start by introducing the work of Chris Grace to you first, and then Chris is going to respond with a short talk illustrated with clips. And then I'm going to introduce Dame Janet, who is currently still on the motorway getting here, but is 10 miles away. So hopefully we'll be here, we'll be ushered, we'll come in and sit at the front here, so that we can move seamlessly from the end of Chris's presentation through to Janet's to honour Janet's contribution, and then at the end of the ceremony, the formal ceremony, we can all move out into the bar where there will be tea and coffee and drinks at the bar and some cakes that I have made specifically. So please come and join us for cakes, otherwise my family is going to be eating cakes for weeks. Okay. So, Christopher Grace, MBE. Chris, it is a great pleasure to honour your achievements in promoting the work of Shakespeare, especially to young people, through animation and education. Chris received his MBE for his services to animation, his programmes ranging from Super Ted to Fireman Sam to Beowulf, The Canterbury Tales, Moby Dick, winning 2 BAFTAs and 2 Oscar nominations, and Chris himself received a BAFTA Special Award for Creative Services, and I think it has been to the benefit of thousands of young people that Chris has brought those creative talents to bear on Shakespeare. As creator and producer of the Shakespeare animated tales in 1995, 90% of the UK secondary schools and many primary schools now use the tales in their introduction to the work of Shakespeare, the language and the plays, making it the BBC Education's most popular series. And in his talk, I think Chris is going to give us an insight into how those wonderful short films for BBC Wales came into being. Though he was born in Kent, Chris has spent most of his working life in Wales, so it is no surprise that his other phenomenal contribution to Shakespeare in education, the Shakespeare Schools Festival, began in Pembrokeshire with 8 schools, 240 pupils and 1 theatre 15 years ago in 2000. And it has now, to quote the inimitable Mrs. Price from Fireman Sam, permanented through the whole country. And in fact, in Fireman Sam, Mrs. Price is talking about her son Norman setting off a stink bomb, and she says that, here's my bad Welsh accent, he just permanented through the whole house. Now, the Shakespeare Schools Festival is far more pleasant affair than a stink bomb, but Chris is a sort of Norman Price, really, releasing that pungent essence of Shakespeare from the bottle.
It's not offended.
Filling the air, getting under the skin to infuse young people's bloodstreams with a real passion for the language and the action of the plays. And the Shakespeare Schools Festival, like the BSA, is a charity for which Chris has worked tirelessly over the past 15 years. It has partnered over 1,000 schools with 138 theatres, so that young people can sense Shakespeare firsthand by putting on abridged productions of the plays themselves, getting up on their feet. This year, the festival has involved over 35,000 performers, 1,186 teachers, and 350 nights of Shakespeare performances. The Shakespeare Schools Festival, like the animated Shakespeare, constitutes a remarkable achievement. So, ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to join me in applauding Chris Grace with the award of Honorary Fellow of the British Shakespeare Association. Tales and Shakespeare Schools.
Thank you very much, Alison. Thank you very much for coming out this afternoon to hear this. Thank you too for the honour of an honorary fellowship. It was a major moment when that letter arrived from you, offering that in the company of somebody like Dame Janet Suzman. I could not believe it. I was literally, quotes, cliched, gobsmacked, end quotes. So thank you very, very much. It's actually, well, I'll come to that moment. And we are, by the way, we've had a few technical problems. I'm going to run about 4 clips in a moment. But thanks to David, we think we've cracked it. But if there are pauses, I shall just keep chatting and just tell you a bit more whilst we put the clips on. So it's going to last about 20 minutes, this. Shakespeare's most famous stage direction is, of course, Exit Pursued by a Bear. And this story, actually, if you're ready, David, it actually begins with a bear.
This is a story about an ordinary teddy bear. When he was made, they found something wrong with him and threw him away like a piece of rubbish into an old dark storeroom. Then, from outer space, a spotty man brought him to life with his cosmic dust. He took him to a magic cloud, where Mother Nature gave him special powers. That bear became Super Ted.
And that bear sold to 100 countries. It was the first British animation to be bought by Disney, and it set the world-class standard of the Welsh animation industry. And as a result of that, we then went on to make Farm and Sam, we worked with Prince of Wales on The Legend of Loch Nagar and so on. Everything had to be at that standard. That is brilliant cell animation, celluloid animation, drawn animation. And that set the standard in a way, Super Ted begat Shakespeare. The consortium that then came together to do the Shakespeare series, the guy who led that then went on to do Bob the Builder. So Shakespeare begat Bob the Builder. But that was in 1982. The Welsh Language Channel was formed against intense sort of opposition. There were huge polarities, linguistic polarities in Wales at that time. And it was important to do something that was different, that established the channel at that level. And it succeeded in doing that. And it represented what animation was at that time. Animation was Disney. There was nothing else around. You had no Nick Park, no Simpsons, no CGI, no Pixar. Animation was Disney. And there was a different tradition in the Soviet Union. And they go in separate ways in the 30s. So the Disney tradition started then, became very much a Cinderella, Jack and the Beanstalk, whatever, that tradition, very commercial, high class, very high quality. But in the Soviet tradition, it followed the same tradition as opera and music. It was an art form, and they animated fairy tales, but they also animated Chekhov. So Natasha Orlova, who went on to do Hamlet and Richard III, when I first met her, she was doing Chekhov. So I knew that somebody like that would understand what Shakespeare was about and could grasp it in a way that we couldn't in the West. So then there came a moment to put the two traditions together. And that literally was 26 years ago this month. In November of 1989, the Berlin Wall came down. And Gorbachev said, come and work with us. A friend of mine on Boxing Day 1989 said, he was controller of BBC Wales, and he said, have you ever thought of animating Shakespeare? And that was the moment I realised that was the big idea. And instead of facing LA, I faced Moscow, went out there, and we started putting together 6 half hours of the Shakespeare tales, and the Shakespeare became a bridge between East and West. The consortium was at BBC Wales, as you've heard, S4C, HBO, and a Russian company. And initially we made just 6.5 hours, and using all sorts of different techniques for each film. The problem we had was a Soviet culture. It was a niet culture. And you didn't dare challenge it. If you made a film, it didn't really matter when it was released or when it was due. You thought it would be for the festival in a year's time. It was usually the festival a year after that. The quality was appalling. You made the stuff, it went to a lab, they didn't care about the standard of it, and you got it back in a dreadful condition. The money, you worked out the budget after you'd made the film. So we were really having to compete with that culture. And that wasn't easy at all. Against that, they knew their Shakespeare. So there was a Pastnak version and there was another version. And they knew their Shakespeare almost as well as Professor Stanley Wells, who's here. And it's just wonderful to see him here, and I'll come to him in a moment. So the first clip you're going to see is from Macbeth. It was voiced by Brian Cox and Zoe Wanamaker. I think you can hear the voice of Sian Phillips as one of the witches. This was done in 1990, and I'll come to the technique as to how we do it. And what you're going to see is, again, cell animation. So this is the traditional drawn animation, but it's done in such a way that when it was first shown in 1992, it came as a complete shock to Western audiences. So let's look at that now.
Is this a dagger which I see before me? I have thee not. A dagger of the mind? A false creation? I go, and it is done. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell.
Dabble, dabble, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes.
How now, you secret black and midnight hags? What is't you do? Answer me to what I ask you.
Say if thou'dst rather hear it from our mouths or from our masters.
Call him. Let me see him. Macbeth! 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 Beware Macduff! Beware the Thane of Pine!
Each second needs 24 drawings to work that out. So a minute, etc., etc. Each film was costing $500,000, and each film like that would take about a year to complete just to do the animation. It was that, but the less drawings you do, the less fluid it is. That is still, 26 years later, I'm sure you'll agree, quite remarkable animation. It still holds up really, really well. We kept a control here by doing the pre and the post-production here. We did the pre-production, which is the storyboarding, the script, and the voice track here. Then you get into the animation. That was then in Moscow or in Armenia. In Armenia, there was a civil war, and we had to move. The only way we could get materials in and out of an aeroflot that ran out of fuel was by sending things back with the pilot, and it literally was in his cabin, and he'd bring all the drawings back up to Moscow. And then there came a moment where the civil war got out of control, and we had to move the crew at that time, leave their families. They had to move to a hotel in Moscow to complete the film. It was a hairy, hairy time, generally. And of course it was even hairier in Moscow in other ways. But so the animation was done there, and then we had the post-production. We brought everything back. Instead of allowing the animation to be screwed up by the labs in Moscow, we brought them all back, and then you get these remarkable effects that you could hear here on that soundtrack back in the UK. So I kept control. There was money then going out to the animators, and I think I paid about £60,000 for the animation, which in those days in Moscow was huge, huge money. And that was the way to keep control. I met about 3 British ambassadors. We did a lot of presentations in the embassy in Moscow, and each one would say, you're the only company that we know where the money hasn't gone down a black hole.